Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. By the way, I want to announce that we have the final details, the details finalized for my formal debate with Chris Date. That will be coming up March the 18th. It will be carried on standingforthetruthministries.com. I will be posting a link and a banner to that debate or about that debate, both on my websites as well as continuing to announce it here on YouTube or Facebook. I'm super excited about this debate. Can't wait for it to get here. But having, a ton of fun preparing for this debate, I have to say. Okay, now yesterday, on Monday, I shared with you the very first of the hermeneutical outline, journalistic outline, if you want to call it that, by which I am approaching the subject of the feast days, and specifically the subject of the Sabbath. Yesterday, we looked at point number one, and that is who received the Sabbath law. And I cited for you Psalms 147, 20 and 21, in which God said, or the psalmist said, God gave his laws unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He has not done so to or for any other nation. Now, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, when someone says, well, God gave Sabbath to all the nations, I'm sorry, that argument will simply not fly. As I said in closing yesterday, unless you can prove definitively that the Sabbath is not a part of the law that God gave Jacob, it's not a part of the statutes or not part of the judgments that God gave to Israel, then here is the psalmist stating emphatically that Sabbath was not given to the nations. It's therefore completely wrong. It is imposing Israel's law on Gentiles when the Gentiles are not part of Jacob or Israel. That would be to Judaize, to use the New Testament terminology. That is a violation of the gospel. Okay? Not only that, I'm going to cover two more points today on this specific topic. We'll touch on it as we proceed in our study. But when you read the ancient literature, the literature of the Jews, it becomes more than obvious that one of the most powerful images that they attach to Sabbath is the idea of the marriage at Sinai. Now, what's fascinating about the language, when you delve into the language of Exodus 19, Exodus chapter 20, you find language there, you find key words there that are used later to speak of when a marriage took place. I won't go into it. I'll just simply, make the observation. You have a marriage taking place, at least a betrothal for certain, at Sinai. Some say God was never actually married. He was simply betrothed, and it waited for the coming of Christ for the marriage to take place. It's a fascinating thought. It's interesting. I'm not going to say that I'm 100% convinced, but nonetheless, it is an interesting thought. Point of fact is, Sinai, in the mind of the Jews, and the ancient rabbis, was seen as the time of the betrothal between Yahweh and Israel. As such, just like Sabbath was a sign, a covenant sign between Yahweh and Israel, as a reminder of Yahweh's deliverance of Israel out of bondage, Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath, was likewise seen as a covenant sign of the marriage between Yahweh and Israel. Now, I don't think I have to tell you that if the Sabbath was a covenant sign of the marriage between Yahweh and Israel, then it was not a covenant sign of a marriage between all mankind and Israel. It's something very distinctive. You know, this ring on my finger, and not very fancy, it's got a few diamonds, little diamonds in it, and I've knocked a bunch of them out working on old cars, and my wife has had to replace them. Of course, they're not exactly 20 karat diamonds either. Anyway, but that ring designates, symbolizes, I'm married to a one woman. I'm not married to 10 women, 15, 20 women. I am married to one woman. And let me assure you, she feels the same way. I'm married to her and no one else. Thusly, or similarly, Sabbath was given as a marriage ring, if I may use the analogy, between God and Israel. And let me remind you once again of Psalms 147. He didn't give that to any other nation. I'll be reminding us of that, I'm sure, over and over and over again. The reality that Sabbath was given to Israel and to Israel only is brought out in many ancient rabbinic commentators. Now, there was a tremendous scholar by the name of Samuel Bakioshi. He passed away a few years ago. Bakioshi was considered the preeminent Sabbatarian scholar in the world. He graduated magna cum laude from the Gregorian Pontifical College at the Vatican. He is the only non-Catholic to receive the honors that he did from the Gregorian College. Incredible, incredible intellect, okay? In his book, From Sabbath to Sunday, about that thick, it was his doctoral thesis. He takes note of the following, and I just want to read. Now, I'm writing a book. I have been writing a book on the Sabbath for the last, 8 years, gathering information, doing the research, and I've gotten sidetracked to do my book on Sukkot. Let me digress. Okay, don't forget for the rest of February, Resurrection Feast, fulfilled, a study of Israel's final feast day, Sukkot, and the resurrection, and these are the days in which all things must be fulfilled. Folks, save yourself, okay, $20. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. There's a banner there. Just click on it. Save yourself the money. And the reason I did that is because obviously this is dealing with the feast days. Now, it's focused on one specific feast day, and that's technically the last. It's not Shemini Atzeroth, but nonetheless, I do talk about Shemini in the book. And, of course, it is the related topic of the passing of the law, because Jesus said, not one jot, not one tittle shall pass in the law until it's all fulfilled. And in describing the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, Jesus said, these are the days in which all things that are written must be fulfilled. Okay, so the law, by the way, that's Rogue One. Sorry about that. The 2-book special is Sukkot and the End of the Law. So forgive me for that blurb there. We have Jesus stating when the law would pass, when it was all fulfilled. And then we have Jesus telling us when all would be fulfilled in Luke 21:22. That really essentially, ladies and gentlemen, in a thumbnail sketch, tells us when observance of the Sabbath, when observance of circumcision, when observance of the feast days, when observance of animal sacrifice, that's when it all ceased. Okay? So anyway, in this book that I'm writing, entitled Celebrating the Eighth Day, Bakioshi cites I cite Bakioshi, and he cites some rabbinic sources who are drawing on the very, very influential and popular book of Jubilees. Book of Jubilees was very influential. And he says, quote, some rabbis teach that non-Jews were actually forbidden to observe the Sabbath day. For example, Simeon ben Lagish said, quote, a Gentile who keeps the Sabbath deserves death, unquote. And he quotes from Rabbi Yose B. Hanina, who said, quote, a non-Jew who observes the Sabbath while he is uncircumcised incurs the liability for the punishment of death. Why? Because non-Jews were not commanded concerning it, unquote, citing Deuteronomy Rabbah 121. Dale Ratzliff, I quote him in this book, cites another scholar, and Ratzliff was at one time a Sabbatarian, by the way, but Ratzliff cites another scholar by the name of Turner who says, Judaism as a whole considered the Sabbath to be binding on Israel only, unquote. So what we have, ladies and gentlemen, is we have a huge, huge conundrum. And here's why. My Sabbatarian friends, when appeal is made to Colossians chapter 2, 16 and 17, when Paul said that Christ took the handwriting of ordinances, which was against us, and he took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross, my Sabbatarian friends say, well, that is referring to the ceremonial Sabbaths. Those are the animal sacrifices. It's not referring to the Sabbath, even though Paul said, don't let any man judge you in respect of new moons, feast days, and Sabbaths, plural, with no restriction, no limitation, no redefinition. But nonetheless, they claim what we have here is the ceremonial Sabbaths being done away with. Well, point number one, Colossians chapter 2 doesn't say the ceremonial laws were passed, had been nailed to the cross. He says the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, contrary to us, that is what was nailed to the cross. And that word, handwriting of ordinances, translated that way, cheirographon, is the handwriting of debt. And as numerous scholars, scholar after scholar after scholar notes, it literally means the handwriting of debt incurred through violation of the law was nailed to the cross, not the law. And then when Paul goes ahead to say that those new moons, those feast days, and those Sabbaths are, in the present tense, a shadow of the good things that are about to come, then it's completely invalid to say, oh, well, Paul was saying that the ceremonial feast days were nailed to the cross. He says exactly the opposite. They were still shadows, still unfulfilled shadows of the things that were about to come. They would not be done away with until what they foreshadowed became a reality. What did the Sabbaths represent, symbolize, and foreshadow? Oh, salvation, resurrection, new creation. Those things were about to come. I don't think it could be any clearer. Now, somebody may say, oh, well, you're quoting from the rabbis. Yes, I am. I'm also quoting from Samuel Bakioshi, who was the foremost Sabbatarian scholar in the world who acknowledges the power of these quotes. Samuel Bakioshi did not say, oh, well, the Jews were just unbelievers. You can't believe anything that they said. Well, the Jews also believed that Messiah was going to come. Were they wrong on that? The rabbis believed that the kingdom would come when Messiah would come. Were they wrong on that? No. Were they wrong on the nature of the kingdom? Yes. Were they wrong on the expectation of the coming of Messiah and his kingdom? No. So you say, when someone makes the argument, oh, well, the rabbis, they were a bunch of unbelieving Jews or something like that. Folks, that's an invalid argument. Has no probative value whatsoever. Fact is, Psalms 147, God gave his laws to Jacob, his statutes and his judgments to Israel, not to any other nation. So in this respect, the Jews were absolutely right. Those rabbis were absolutely correct. The seventh-day Sabbath was never given. It wasn't given even to Abraham. We have no record of it whatsoever. Never given to Isaac, never given to Jacob. We have no record whatsoever of Israel observing Sabbath in Egypt. The only record we have is he gave his law unto Jacob and his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. That's the definitive statement. The Sabbath was not given to the nations. The Sabbath was not given to Gentiles. It means it wasn't given to you and to me. I'm out of time. Don't forget, order the books, folks. I'm telling you, that's a huge saving for you. Please take advantage of it. In the meantime, see you on the flip side.